In this series, we're going to learn about the Build and Edit tool, which is the scripting feature of Cmix. The Build and Edit tool is the heart of the Cmix system because it is where you will actually construct and edit your survey. We'll give you a brief navigation overview, as well as show you how to add questions, update response option randomizations, add question level skip or display logic, add logical options such as terminations, and or larger skips for larger page paths. We'll show you how to put in basic quotas, and we'll also show you how to access the theme card and update the theme of your survey. While this video is focused on the core survey scripting techniques you will need to get started, you'll also find details on more advanced techniques, including images and concept testing in separate sessions. In this session, we're going to give you a general overview as it pertains to the navigation of the Build and Edit tool. On the left-hand side, you'll see this is called the question tree. This is where you'll be able to make any modifications or open cards in which you can make modifications in general. So I'll just start at the very top, survey settings. We have a number of options when you click on that option to expand. Manage survey. This is just primarily used mostly for being able to update your survey name. So you can go in there, and it's actually the very top item on the list. The majority of these other items I won't cover in this particular session, but we may refer back to it in different sessions as well. Theme card is where you can customize the theme to your survey. You have a number of built-in options that you can activate, or you can go in and modify them as you see fit and save them to either the survey or to the overall company level. File upload is where you have the ability to click on the add file at the top right, and then you can upload files, usually images and things of that nature, to be used somewhere else within the survey. Localization is where you'll be able to control some of the pieces as it pertains to multilingual projects. So you can add languages, which will also create links and the ability to download and export a translation file, which you can then use for import. We'll go over that again in depth in a separate section. Default text. This houses all of the default error messaging for the entire survey, which you do have the ability to come in and update as you see fit. Sample sources and end pages is where you would go in and be able to add any recruitment methods as you see fit and then customize them in their end pages. Quotas gives you the ability to review any of the quotas that you've built into your survey in one fell swoop. Termination codes, this is rarely ever used, but this is just a list of all of the termination codes used in your particular survey. Lookups is a section in which you can actually import an Excel file, in essence, which you can utilize within your program to either set variables or store data and things of that nature. Most common way to refer to this is doing Cmix's version of a VLOOKUP in Excel. So I'll just close that section. I'll expand the variables. Variables have a couple of different parts. System variables refer to the variables that are created by default for every single survey. So these particular items are here for every single survey. You do not have the ability to modify them other than once you update your localization card or the sample sources card that will add additional punches within these two variables. By default, you will always have them. You just might have some different options depending on how you customize things. Custom variables, you have the ability here to add custom variables which are not seen directly by a respondent unless you physically want to, for example, pipe in the answer to a respondent, or if you're using them for any other specific concepts. This is one thing we'll definitely go into in a following session, but here you'll be able to add concept assignments. This is basically the overview here is being able to create any sort of concept evaluation, meaning that you can come here and do an assignment of X of Y items. So for example, you have 5 cells and you want to assign somebody to every respondent to one of the 5 cells by either least fill or randomly or what have you. This is where that sort of assignment type of transaction would happen. Then at the bottom, I'm going to skip the questionnaire filter for a second, but towards the bottom here, this is where you would be able to add your pages, quota checks, logic pages, you can see. So quota checks are pages are these orange cards that are appear here on the left hand side. They are indicated with a little bit of a icon here. So if I even hover over it, it'll say quota check. We do that just in case anybody's actually colorblind. We had a few people internally that were, but that's the reason why we have these little icons here, just in case you can't see that this is orange. And then the next page down is a logic page, which is purple. Again, hover over the little icon on the left hand side, you can see that that's logic. And these other pages are the equivalent of a screen to a respondent. So page 1 is one question by itself on this page alone. So this means that a respondent would see this particular question, which is what is your gender, on a page by itself or a screen by itself. So each page corresponds to a screen to a respondent. So they'll see one question here and hit the next page button to continue. They don't physically see the quota checks or the purple logic pages, but they would physically touch them as they go through the survey itself. And then if I scroll back up to the top for the questionnaire filter, this is a handy little filter that will allow you to search for any question. So let's say, as an example, I have here, as you can see, a bunch of questions and a very basic rudimentary survey built in here. If I wanted to search for Q2, just typing that in the field up there, that will bring up anything, any page that has Q2 associated with it. So this will help me, especially in the edits process. So let's say, for example, client or colleague come back and they say, you need to update the question text here, or maybe you didn't turn on the randomization, or can you verify that the randomization is working here? You can use the questionnaire filter to search for, again, this case Q2, and go in and make your updates as you see fit. So just a quick way to navigate through the question tree to quickly get to maybe a specific area in which you're trying to access. Now, if I get rid of that filter, everything will come back here. So I just clicked on the X that appeared there. At the very, very bottom, you have 4 buttons. These will be your best friends throughout the entire process of your survey authoring / survey building process. The first button on the left-hand side is the ability to, I'll just click on this quickly, to add any sort of logic. So terminations, adding logic blocks, and you can see that there's some examples here of what you can do with them. Also the ability to add termination points, skip logic, set variables, and a number of other particular features. You can add quota check page. You can also add a custom JavaScript page as well here too. So if you're trying to use JavaScript for any sort of logical operation, you can do that as well. So I'll cancel that one. The next one over is to add a section. So by default, you'll see that there's one section up here. That is actually the default when you create a survey from scratch, is to have one section and a page on its own. But if I want to add an additional section, I can click on the second button, and you can see another section is down here towards the bottom. So the couple of use cases for this is, one, just for your own purposes, a sort of summary or a breakdown of your survey in general. So let's say maybe I want to go up here to the section 1. Maybe this whole battery of questions is tied to my screener. I can go in here and say, in this section label field, I can click on that and add the word screener as an example. If I click away, you'll see that word screener now appears here on the question tree. So now I know that that's my full screener. So maybe I don't want to see this particular section because I'm done with it, as an example. I can just truncate it, and then maybe my next section here, I'll click on the section header of section 2. And if I wanted to label this as, again, as I see fit, maybe you want Q1 through Q20, you can do that. So it's really for organizational purposes, at least the section label too, and to truncate items in chunks. The sections are also used when we're discussing concept loops, but that's going to be another full session in the future as well too. So if I get out of here, the next button over on the bottom is the third one over, adding a page. So if I click on that button, this will allow me to add a page, meaning a screen to a respondent, and I can select this drop down to position it wherever I want. So for example, If I needed this to go after Q1 for any sort of reason, I can just say before or after that particular one and add it in between other questions that have already been built. Don't need to use this. By default, the dropdown will say end of section, new page. So if I just leave it alone, this means it's just going to tack it onto the bottom. And you're just going to keep adding items to the bottom of the question tree. So if I need a page for any reason, I can do that. I then want to show you the last one, which is probably the most important one, is the add question icon, the fourth one over on the bottom of the question tree. This will allow you to add a question on a page by default, meaning I don't have to add the page like I did before, that third button over. Don't need to do that if I don't want to. I can just add a question, and by default it will add it on a page of its own as I'm building it. So most likely your workflow is going to be adding or clicking this fourth button over throughout your survey building process, so that you have one question on a page of its own, you build it, you're done customizing it, then you click on that button again and you do the same process for whatever the next question is. And you can continue all the way through. That's not to say that you can't add multiple questions to a page. You can see that there is an add new question button on this blank page in this example. I can click on that button and I'll see that same new question menu, so I can build a question right here and continue to add new question to this page too. So for example, if I wanted to have multiple questions on a page, I can continue to do that. But again, that means that this screen to a respondent would have however many questions I have built on this page shown to them, and they would have to answer all the questions on that page and then hit the next page button to continue. So a use case for that would be something like adding gender and age, maybe, because there could be smaller questions, both maybe drop downs as an example, or maybe one's a drop down, one's a numeric input. You can do that so that the respondent sees those two questions and it minimizes the number of clicks to submit the next page. Now when I'm clicking on any of these items on the question tree, you can see that what will happen is, so I'll just click on Q1 as an example. This will open up a window in the main screen here. This is also called a stage. This is the question card. We refer to these as cards. So here is where you'll do all your modifications to this particular question. And if I click on the page, this is the page card where you'll be able to modify that, and so forth. So this is where you're going to do all the modifications to the specific questions that you're building. Questions, variables, survey settings, any of those cards that you open up, that's where you'll be doing the customizing of each individual one. You do also have kind of a hidden gem on the top right hand side. There's a layout options view. If I expand this button, you'll see that you have 3 different views and a close option. What this will do is allow you to navigate your stage or the main window here in a few different methods. My preferred method is single card. Once you select whatever it is that you want to have as your default, you'll pick one. I have single card selected. That means that if I click on one of these questions, maybe I'm done modifying it, I click on another question because maybe I need to modify it, it will close now Q1, which was what I originally had open, and then open up Q2. This helps so that you don't have to see multiple things at once and possibly get confused as to which card you're working with. So this will allow you to know, and you can see that this is highlighted too, so you know that Q2 is the one that's opened. So if I, again, go back to another card, whether that's logic or quotas or anything, that those particular items, once I click on it, it gets highlighted, and that particular item gets opened up and takes the full view of the main window or the main screen or the stage here. The other options here are, when you first log into Cmix and use the authoring tool, the default is 1 column, meaning that I'll have one card open right now, but if I click on another one, they'll get stacked over on top of each other. And you can see that they're both highlighted. So you have 2 cards open now at the same time. Now I have 3. So I have 3 different cards open right now at the same time. If I'd like to, I can utilize this to my advantage for the purposes of being able to look at this question and maybe looking at Q1 at the same time. So that's one of the use cases for that. I may also want to go over and switch this to 2 columns. What this will do is allow you to have, you can see a side-by-side view, and you can drag these around as you see fit. The items show up side by side if you'd like. So if I wanted to look at this particular card at the same time as working on this card for whatever the reason, I have that capability and that functionality available to me. So if I need to know the punches at Q3 while I'm working on Q2, sometimes it's good for logical operations. So if you're setting questions or setting variables and you want to look at the punch numbers so you don't have to remember it or memorize it, you'll be able to utilize this to your advantage. But again, same idea. Because you can have multiple items open at once, they're all highlighted here at the same time. I still have the ability to close them, so I only have these two open right now. But I can also go to my layout options and hit close all, and that'll close everything. Now the system will save whatever the last view is that you selected. So let's say I come in, again, by default, first time I log into the system, I am by default on one column. If I need to change that, I can click up here. Maybe I want to go to single card and have that be my default going forward. The system will remember that setting, meaning that if I log out for the day or for a few hours, that setting will still be here and will persist. So it will remain as such until I change it again, whether that's today, tomorrow, a week from now, 2 years from now. But I can change this at any point. But whatever the last option is that you selected, that will be what it'll be set to going forward. You also have the ability up here on the top left, right next to the question tree, the ability to collapse this window too. So if you wanted to use that 2 columns layout, you can do that, and then this will allow you to truncate it so you can maximize the number of cards you have on the screen and or the width depending on your screen resolution. So it'll just make the 2 cards wider if necessary, but you can expand and collapse that as you see fit. We'll talk about the header up here for a sec. If you click on this Cmix logo, this will take you back to the survey launchpad, meaning the project list. So this is a hyperlink back to the project list. You'll see your survey name up here. You'll see your current survey status. You'll see the words build and edit because this is the location where I'm in currently. You'll see that there's a downward facing arrow. In a number of the different areas of the system, you'll see that there is a downward facing arrow, and if you hover over it, it'll say menu. So if I click on it, it'll give you a menu or a shortcut menu to be able to get back to any certain location within this project. So if you need to go to the manage and monitor screen, you can come here and click on that and it'll take you there. Also on the top right now, you'll see there's a task icon. So if you have any tasks here or you want to access the task feature, you can just click on this at any time and this will open up the tasks. We'll talk about this in a future, a little bit more in depth in a future session as well. The little question mark is a link to the knowledge base. We learned about this in the intro and basic navigation of the system overall, but you can click on this question mark to access our knowledge base. Any articles that are tied to the system, you can just search for keywords or phrases and you'll be able to find them rather quickly. You can click on the link and it'll open up the full article here on the side. If this is still too small, you can click on the title of the article and it'll open up in a brand new window for you. And if you want to close it, there's a little X at the top right. Or if you still can't find what you're looking for, you still have some outstanding questions, you can click on the Ask feature, and then you can select the particular solution and or product that you're asking about, hit Next, and then you can, pretty much works like an email system, which sends a ticket to our customer success team, so you can enter in the subject line and whatever the body is of your question, and then hit send a message. If you want to get out of this window, you can either A, click away from the icon itself, from that widget, or if you wanted to, you can also just click on the question mark again, and that'll close it. In the very top right, you'll see your initials here. You can click on that, and if, depending on your account settings and what your permission level is, you'll be able to have some further options. So manage users, manage groups, manage library, manage clients. So again, depending on your overall role and permission level, you'll be able to see or not see some of these options. And then here's the My Account and the Logout feature as well. This has been a general navigation overview of the Build and Edit tool. In this session, we're going to discuss the Build and Edit tool. This is where you'll be scripting or authoring your survey. I am going to start with Survey 3, currently on my Cmix Launchpad or project list. I can either click on the project name itself and go directly into the survey dashboard and find the area that I want to click on. Or, in this case, I just want to go directly to the Build and Edit tool and I don't want to go to the survey dashboard whatsoever. I can click on this menu icon and click on Build and Edit. Once you do that, you'll be in the Build and Edit tool. You'll see that you have a question tree on the left-hand side, is what we refer to this as. And then the bigger area is where you'll be doing your customizations. So by default, you get a section and a blank page to start from. And to do so, the easiest way to do that is to click on the Add New Question button. This will bring up the new question menu, where you have a lot of built-in options, both in the standard and advanced, as well as the library. We'll go into some of those details in future sessions. But for now, what we'll do is just add a standard radio item question to go on this first page. I can also rename this question. So if I don't want it to be Q1, this is the default because there's no other questions already in the survey. But as you can see, if I leave this as Q1, if I do go to add another question after this, it'll try to add a logical order. So the next question by default will be Q2, but you can change that at any point, either in this menu, or I'll show you on the following couple of screens when you're in the actual question card when you're trying to customize. So for now, I'll leave it as Q1, radio items, I'll hit create. And now I have the question on this page. Here's the question card where I'll do all of my customizations. And here, again, I can add as many questions as I want to this page, but just know that a page in the question tree correlates to a screen for a respondent. So if I have 5 questions on this particular page, the respondent will see these 5 questions on the same page, have to most likely do some scrolling, answer those questions, and then click on the next page button to continue. So anytime you've got a page, that means the respondent will have to answer everything on that page and hit the next page button to continue. So I will now go into my question card. The very first field at the top is question text. This is universal throughout all of the exercises. So here I can, in this case, I'm going to use a very basic example. What is your gender? I'm just typing that in manually, but you can copy and paste from Word, Excel, and so forth. Just note that sometimes, depending on the formatting of the document in which you're trying to copy from, that formatting might come along with it, so you might have to do some tweaks in that regard. But for now, I've just got what's your gender. There is next the instruction field. This is not required whatsoever, but this is most commonly used for something like select one as an example for this particular question type. But again, not required whatsoever. If I scroll to the very bottom, this is my response list, so the options that are available to the respondent. So here I'll type in male, female. Again, you can copy and paste without a problem. And if you are copying and pasting, a quick trick and tip, you can copy the full list from Word as an example, and just copy and paste it directly into the first response, and it should parse them out for you. Meaning that if you had bullet points, they would all be parsed out into separate individual responses for you. You might have to do some cleaning up in that regard, but they should parse them out for you. So the system is kind enough to take that into account for you. So that is the very basics of setting up a very straightforward basic radio question. I can continue to add more questions to this page on the left-hand side in the question tree if I wish, but in most likely 90 to 95% of your workflow, you're going to want to have a question on a page and or screen to a respondent. So what you'll want to do is continue to add questions. But you're not going to want to add a page, a blank page, to then add a question, a blank page to add a question. You can do that if you wish. So the buttons on the bottom left of the question tree, there are 4 of them. The third one over is add a page. If I wanted to add a page, I can click on add a page, and it will add a blank one just like you saw initially when we first came in with the page with nothing on it. So you can do that and then click on new question if you wish. You can do that without a problem. But for the most part, again, you're going to want a question already on a page. So the fourth button over on the bottom of the question tree is the add question button. This will allow you to see that same menu, and you can see again now the numbering is going to Q2 already by default. You can again change that as you see fit and select the question type you wish, but now you'll see that there's a placement option. So what this will do is by default it will add this page with the question already on it by default at the end. So it'll continue to tack things on to the bottom of this list in the question tree. If I want to place it somewhere else before or after the first page or second page, you can use the interface to do that as well. So I'm just going to add another radio question again to have this quickly done for us. I'll hit create, and here is the question on a page already by itself. So again, most likely you'll be clicking on this fourth button over very, very frequently. I can go in and now delete this page. It's blank because I don't want to utilize it. Or I can just add another question to it if I see fit, or I can drag it down. All of these options on the left-hand side in the question tree are draggable and droppable. So if I even wanted to move Q2 to the same page as Q1, I can drag and drop it as well. Or remove it. I can move it to another page. Or if I do want to get rid of the page, I can click on the vertical ellipsis to the top right of the page itself, and you'll see that there's a number of options. In this case, I want to delete. It'll ask you to confirm, and then we'll remove it. And earlier I did mention that you also do have the ability to rename your questions. So let's say, for example, you weren't paying attention, it added Q2. Maybe I want this to be Q2A. I can just add the letter A to the end of it. And if I click on the add question button again on the bottom right, you'll see Q2B is now the default for the next question. Again, I can change that. So maybe I want to get out of the A and B's. I can go to Q3. And that is the basics of the build and edit tool and adding questions. In this session, we're going to go over some of the overall question settings. I'm currently in the build and edit tool, and I'm going to click on Q2 here on the side. This is a checkbox question. I'm going to add some responses. So right now I have this checkbox question with 6 total responses. So here, what I want to do is randomize these options. To do so, I'm going to click on the gear icon on the top right of my question card, and I'm going to scroll down to Custom Response Order. I'm going to toggle that on. Once I have this on, by default, every item in this response list is being randomized. As you can see, punches 5 and 6 are other and a none, respectively. So most likely, I am going to want to anchor the other and the none at the bottom. To do so, I can go to the Add Randomization Group section under the Custom Response Order. In the From, I'm going to select 5, meaning punch 5, 2, 6 for punch 6, so that it counts for the other and the none, and I'm going to add this group. By doing that, these two particular options are going to be linked together 100% of the time. So I created a subgroup within my response list. So 5 and 6 are now always going to be together. Now you can see in this randomization summary that I have the button that says shuffle is on by default, meaning that These two items, 5 and 6, are also shuffled. So I could see it as other than none or none and then other. If I wanted to, I can click on this linear option, which will make this always appear as other first and none second. So meaning in the programmed order. So that accounts for the items within these two buttons. Shuffle and linear account for the items within this grouping. The padlock at the end is currently opened or unlocked, meaning that this group, overall group, is being randomized between all the others. So 5 and 6 could appear between 1 and 2, 3 and 4, anywhere randomly within these other options. If I wanted to now lock this group that I've created in its program position, I'll just click on the padlock to lock it. So now this grouping of 5 and 6 will always be at the bottom in their program position. Most people always ask, do I now have to account for options 1 through 4? The answer is no. You do not have to do that because you're now taking care of the grouping of 5 and 6 by default. You can still, if you wanted to, select options 1 through 4 and create a from 1 to 4 randomization group, but you do not have to, if all you're trying to accomplish is just anchoring the other and the none. If you wanted to, for example, keep options 1, 2, and 3 together, I can select 1 to 3, add the group. So now 1, 2, and 3 are always going to be together. Maybe I still want them randomized, so shuffle is still on, but I do not care where they appear within the rest. So 1, 2, and 3 could appear again in between 4 and 5, or 5 and 4 because it's randomized. So they're always just going to be together, but they're going to be randomized within themselves. I can create another subgroup within. So for example, maybe I want 2 and 3 to always be together. You can see that there's a bit of an indentation here because it's a subgroup of the one level higher. So I can also control that. So now 1, 2, and 3 are always together, but 2 and 3 are always together, and if I want them to go 2 and then 3, I can do that as well. Because of the grouping of them together, you could have option 1 and then 2 and 3, or options 2 and 3 followed by 1. And you still have the padlocks available too if you want to lock them in their program positions. This has been the basics of adding a randomization to a question. In this session, we're going to go over one of the more common overall question settings, and that's skip and display logic. Right now I'm in the Build and Edit tool. I have Q2 open. I'm going to click on the gear icon on the top right. If I scroll down, you'll see the two options, skip logic and display logic. You can only use one or the other. The reason why this is the case is because over the years we've seen throughout the survey programming process that questionnaires are sometimes written as show this question if such and such a logic operation is true, or hide this question if such and such a logical operation is true. So what we've done is added both options here to make it easier for you. The biggest reason that is because most systems or programming platforms only give you the one option. And then you have to internally try to figure out the inverse in some certain scenarios of the inverse of a logical operation. This way, we don't have to do that. You can just type in the formula as you see fit based on the questionnaire. So what I'm going to do is select skip logic in this particular case. When I click on that, I have a UI that appears. So in this question/variable field, I can type in the question number that I want to search for. So I'll search for Q1 and then use the drop downs equals 1 in this case. And I can just leave it as is. I can use ands and ors within this particular subset of the particular formula that I'm building, or I can use an overall, more overarching and an or as well. So this will allow you to use drop downs to build out your formula. And you can see the raw formula appears up here at the top. We do that on purpose. The reason why we do this is because when you're first learning, one of the harder parts of the system to learn is the logic syntax. If, after a while, you learn the logic syntax because you can see it actually building your formulas, sometimes you will say that using all of these drop-downs might be a little bit more work than actually building the raw formula. So to that point, what we've done was allow you to use the advanced option to come in and type in a raw formula. So you do not have to use the UI and the drop-downs and select everything to build a very intricate formula if you don't want to. It's still there and available if you wish to use it, but you can also type in a raw formula if you see fit. Now, if I just hit save, this will put this skip logic condition in place, and then we're there. Just know that when you add skip or display logic on a question, this means that only this specific question will be skipped or displayed. So usually you're only going to want to do this on the question level if you only have the skip over one question. If you have 5 questions as an example, and the formula is going to be the same, you're not going to want to do that. There is going to be, in a future session, we're going to go over some more in-depth logic and type scenarios, including larger, more broad-scaled skips and or page paths, as it's more commonly referred to. But in this particular case, you can see this particular question is getting skipped if Q1 equals 1. I can go back and edit it if I wish, or clear and save to start it from the beginning. In this case, I'm going to hit cancel. And you can also now see that the display logic toggle is off and it's grayed out completely. So you can only use one or the other. This has been a quick tutorial on how to add a question level skip and or display logic. In this session, we're going to show you how to add a termination. I'm currently in the Build and Edit tool. And let's say I see I have Q1, which is a what is your gender. It's only got 2 options, male, female. If I want to have 100% of the folks taking the survey to be female, what I can do is add a termination in place. Now, there's 2 ways to do this. On the bottom of the question tree, very, very bottom left, there is an add logic or quota page button. If I click on this button, there is a quick term option, which is the default. I'll leave that as is in this case and hit add. This will be option number 1. You'll see that there is a UI where I can search for my questions. So if it's a very straightforward termination point, I can just search and say if Q1 equals 1 term. I'll hit create, and what will happen is you'll see in the question tree, you will see a page that appears right after Q1 because that's the question that I selected from the dropdown, so the term will be inserted right after the question that I just indicated. And if I just refresh really quickly, it will also open up, just clicking on that page too. This is the page that was inserted. It's purple, but it also has this little icon next to it indicating that it's logic. So this will open up the termination point that I just created. So only if Q1 equals 1, terminate using code Q1 term 1. So that Q1 term 1 is created by default, meaning that because you used the UI, you looked at Q1, it's the first term that you selected off of Q1, so that's why it's called Q1 term 1. Now you can, if you wanted to, move this around. So let's say, for example, your end client says, I want to move all of the terms after page 3, or whatever this question is. Let's say it's Q2. I can just drag and drop that right after that, and I'm done. I've just moved my termination point. I can move it back if I wish, but I can also drag and drop it and move it wherever I want it to go. Another option you could do is to click on that same button, bottom left, very first button on the bottom left of the question tree, and I select logic block, second option down, and I can place it wherever I wish as well. So if I wanted to insert it right after Q1, I can select after, there's only one section here, so section 1, page 1. If you don't select a placement, it'll just add it to the end. It just keeps adding everything to the end if you do not indicate a placement. So here's a blank logic page. So now it's page 2. If I click on add block, I now have an always in the dropdown, so meaning 100% of the time. I want to conditionalize this, so I'm going to select only if. Then I can even use either that raw syntax, so like the other one I used, it was Q1 equals 1, so I can use that, or I can click on create on the far right. This will again bring that UI up, that it's also available throughout the system in different locations. But if I wanted to say Q1 equals 1, hit save. Now my logic has been saved, and here's my formula. So if Q1 equals 1, right now it's not doing anything, it's just saying this is the formula. I can then go to my action dropdown and select terminate. When you do that, it says terminate using code. If I click on this dropdown, which you should, in this case, click on add new code, I can create a termination code. So I'm going to make this be a code that makes sense to me. So I'm going to say Q1 dash male. Or I could just say gender, or Q1 gender, whatever makes the most sense to you. I'll hit create. So now that's my termination code. The reason why these termination codes are important is because these codes are added to your termination report on the survey dashboard. So if I go back, I can click on the words build and edit at the top. You can see there's an arrow going down because this is a similar menu that you've seen throughout the system so far. If I click on here, here is that menu. If I go to, I'll go to manage and monitor just to go back to the survey dashboard. And if I go to the terms and dropouts in the fielding area, you'll see there's a number of built-in termination codes. Those are only used, well, the majority of them are only used for recoding after the fact. They're just built in and they're just labeled there. But if I scroll down, you'll see that Q1 term 1 from that quick term, and then the Q1 male. While you're in field, this report will sort in descending order. You can already see that it's already highlighted in that column and it's sorting in that order. So once you're in field, if this is the highest term point, whichever one this is, so I'll click on Q1 term 1, if that is the highest area with terms, then this will be at the top of the list. So it will behoove you to be able to make these term codes something that makes sense to you, so that if you ever do need to make any sort of changes while you're in field, you'll know, or loosen restrictions and that sort of thing, while you're in field, you'll know exactly where the majority of your terms are coming from. That's the importance of the term code. Now if I go back to my build and edit tool, clicking on build and edit on the left, I now have those two pages. Again, page 2 is the one where I added the block. Now, even within the one that I selected as the quick term, I still have the ability to go in here and change this. So I can click on the little pencil to edit it, or I can continue to type in more of the raw formula. Meaning that I can go in here and say, and maybe this one's not going to make sense, but I'm just doing it for the purposes of you being able to visually see a longer formula. Q2_1 doesn't equal 1. Again, just making that up. But you can see that you can continue adding on. It's not like you're locked into having that termination code and you have to start from scratch. It's available there. It's an open content field. You can go and update it at any point. Same for, so this was that quick term, and that would be the same is true for that regular logic block that I added. So if I wanted to do or something else, Q2_3 equals 1. Again, making that up. It'll then save. You can continue to add more blocks to any logic page if you wanted to, but there are pros and cons to that particular scenario. So if you wanted to, as I was talking about earlier, moving around terms, if you expect that there's a possibility that you might want to move a term from one place to another, you might want to just put the terms on individual pages themselves and just be able to move them around. Because if you continue to add a block here, you can, again, like I said, you can add as many termination points or even any other logical actions on a page. But if you did need to move things around, you would have to delete some of the options off of this logic page and build a whole nother one from scratch to account for what you're either moving or needing to delete. So you'd have to do some manual items, only if you expect that sort of scenario to possibly happen. If you don't expect it to happen, you can absolutely add more blocks to a page. And that is the basics of adding terminations. In this session, we're going to go over using logic to create a page path or a larger skip pattern. Currently in the Build and Edit tool, on the question tree, you can see that I have 5 questions in total with some logic. These are both terms, but I'm going to click on the bottom left-hand side, very first button on the bottom of the question tree. I'm going to add logic block, and I'm going to place it after section 1, page 1. Click add. So now you'll see I have a logic block page here. I can add a block, but let's talk about what we're going to do first as an example. So Q1 is a gender question. It's just a select one, so it's punches 1 or 2. So if I want to skip anybody who is a male to Q4, I do not want to go into each individual question in between and add a skip or display logic. You can if you want to, but you can do it all in one place at one time. So if there's ever any changes, you'll be able to just update the one location and then you're done, instead of having to go into multiple. So to that end, I have page 2, a logic block page. I'm going to add a block, and I'm going to say only if, and I'm going to use my logic UI by hitting the button called create on the right hand side. I'll select Q1 equals 1. And I'm going to hit save. So now if Q1 equals 1, which is male, I want to, in this action dropdown, select, you can see there's a number of options. I want to say skip. So I'm going to select, there's a couple of options. There's 2 page and 2 question. So there's some use cases for each. In general, it's easier to skip 2 question, because here I can just say skip to Q, and there's an auto-fill box here too. So maybe it's skip to Q4, and then you're done. So As a respondent, I'm going to come in, touch page 1. What is your gender? If I say 1, male, which is this formula here, I will then skip to Q4. Skip pattern is complete. Doesn't matter how many pages you're skipping here. You can skip a number of 50 pages if you wanted to. So, and that's absolutely fine. If, for example, I wanted to skip to a logic page, maybe there's some sort of logic that is setting variables or forward coding questions or something like that. That's the use case in which you would select the to page instead, because you would want to land on, let me even use this as an example, land on page 4, because I don't want the stuff in between to happen. I'm going to skip to page 4. So I'm skipping to page 4 because that's a logic page and it has no question associated. So I want all the items on this page to execute. And if they're true or false or whatever's happening here, in this case it's a term, I want this to happen. If I skipped to Q4, as an example, nothing in between would execute, meaning that I'm on page 2. I'm literally playing leapfrog is what I usually describe this as. So if I go here, I'm on page 2. I skip pages 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and land on Q4. So nothing in between is going to happen. Anything on these pages is completely skipped over and not going to execute. This would include logic, the answering of questions, and even quota check pages if you had those in place too, which we'll go over in another session. So the order of operations is always important. And to that case too, I have here that skip is on page 2. If I needed a term to happen first, I would need that to go in the proper area first. So here's the terms that are going to happen, and then page 4 would be the skip. If this is true, then skip. Because I don't want the people who maybe should have termed be able to skip and get through this. I want to terminate those folks first and then do my skip pattern to get people out to where they need to land. And that is how to use logic to create page paths or skips. In this session, we're going to show you how to add a basic quota check to your survey using a quota check page. I'm currently in the Build and Edit tool. I'm going to click on the first button on the bottom left of the question tree, and I'm going to select the third option down, which is quota check. So now that's highlighted, and I have a placement option. So if I wanted to insert this after page 1, as an example, I can use these drop downs to place it directly there. So now you can see on the question tree, it's the second page in the survey. And the the quota check page does open now in the main screen. So if I wanted to, I can insert a quota by clicking on Edit Quotas. And you'll see all of the questions so far that are available because they've either been set at this point with logic or you've actually answered the question itself. And that particular question is available to be used by the quota interface. There are also any variables which have been set to this point as well. If, for example, I move this quota check page after page 7, then most likely Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 would all appear in this section of the questions that I can use to select from, assuming they have the ability to become eligible for quotas. And I say that because the only types of questions that are available to be utilized for that sort of quota check are radio questions, because they're mutually exclusive. Checkbox questions are also available, but numerics are not, because, for example, if you had a numeric input, you could type in any number between, let's say, 0 to 100, if that was the case. So that would not be a question type that would be eligible for a quota to be associated. You can, if you needed to, create a custom variable or a hidden question that buckets the groups of this numeric input, for example, age buckets and so forth. You can do that, and we'll show you that in a future session. So numeric inputs are not directly available for quota checks. So in this particular scenario, I have Q1, which is my gender question. So I'm just going to click on Q1, hit save, and now I have my two options for my quotas, male and female. Now the system is based off of limits, so maxes. So if I want 200 total males and maybe 300 total females, I'll just enter in those maxes, and now I'm done. I can also, up at the top, use the label to my advantage as well. So I'll show you the use case right now. So by default, the label says quota check. I can add more text or remove text as I see fit, but I'll leave the quota check, and then I will add the word gender. The reason I like to point this out is because you can have multiple quota check pages throughout your survey. So if you use the label to your advantage, you'll know exactly which one is which, and it also appears on the question tree, so you know exactly what is happening on that particular page. Now, if I go to my survey dashboard in the quota section, I will now have a quota check page that I indicated as gender. So this is another reason why it's helpful to use that label, because if you do have multiple, you can know which one is which, because they'd all be here and be truncated, so you'd have to expand to see which one is which. So if you label it, you'll know exactly where that particular one you're looking for might reside. So here is my quota table. If I wanted to, I do have the ability, while in field or even before, as long as I've already got the quota check page built, I can at any point now click on Edit Quotas on the survey dashboard and update my limits. So for example, if I maybe put in the wrong number, maybe this should have been 300, maybe I want 300 apiece, I can come here and update these figures and then hit Save Quotas. And this saves in real time. So if you're in field and you have to do that, that is not a problem whatsoever. Traffic would continue to come in, and those folks would then be able to continue through the survey and make it past this quota check if they were males in this case, because I opened it up. You can also decrease these numbers if you wanted to shut down a specific group. So if I have enough females and I want to stop that, I can go in here, click on Edit Quotas, and decrease this number because I have enough. And I want to focus on my males. I'll just hit save, and now I'm done. Now if I go back to the Build and Edit tool, I'll show you another use case. So I'm going to add another quota check page, and I will this time add it after page 7, just randomly adding it down the line. Now if I click on Edit Quotas, I have those additional questions, but I've only got these same variables that exist. So the variables are here that I can utilize to my advantage too. So let's say I wanted to have a matrix. So I want a gender by, let's say Q2. So now just by checking them off, they're now available and are going to be a part of this table that I'm creating. Now you'll see that the word row then appears next to these particular questions. I do have the option to switch them to column as well. So if I switch the gender to column and leave the row for Q2 and hit save, I've now created a matrix. So now I have the ability to control the overalls for all of these and also the intersections. So here's males who selected Apple. So I can insert, I'm making up these limits, but I can add them here. And now those will be my limits. Again, I can control the overalls as well for both the rows and for the columns. But for now, I'm just using the cells in between, so the intersection of the row and the column, and not accounting for the overall. Now I can, up here again in my label, if I wanted to, I can do gender by Q2, go back to the quotas on the survey dashboard, and now you'll see here's the second quota check page with the intersections. And again, same idea, I can click on edit quotas and update my limits as I see fit. The key to also understand is that if you leave quota limits in the build and edit tool or on the survey dashboard quotas section, and if you leave them blank, then they are not going to be termed. So in essence, this means that there is no quota limit, so you're just really reviewing the counts. If I, for example, added a 0 here instead, that would actually terminate anybody who selected this particular option. So that's a delineation that I like to mention to everybody. If I wanted to, I can also go to the top right of this quota check page and click on the vertical ellipsis to review some options. This will bring up the bulk edit feature. And here you can see it's what looks to be an Excel-based table of my quotas. So if I did, for example, have this already in Excel file, maybe the client sent me this directly and said, here is my quota table with all my limits. I can just copy and paste them directly here in one shot instead of having to go into each individual cell and type them in manually using the UI on the prior screen. So if I hit cancel, I'm just going to leave that as is, but that is an option for you as well. Just like any of these other pages, these quota check options are draggable and droppable, so you can move them wherever you wish. But just keep in mind that if you've already built a quota check and the question has now not been answered, if you've moved it in the opposite direction, so if I wanted to move this particular one before Q2 and I have not set it using logic, that this quota check page is not going to really work out for you. You'd have to just keep that in the back of your mind, that the order of operations and the placement of these pages and questions and logic all are important. So far I've showed you two different types of quota checks. So I showed you an overall on this page 2. And then I've also showed you a matrix showing the intersections. If I needed to go an extra level, where I needed to have, for example, age, gender, and income, in that particular case, I would have to create either a hidden question or a hidden variable and then utilize that within my quota interface to be able to insert that instead. Same with age buckets is one of the bigger use cases for that exact example. So the system can only really account for 2 questions/variables, one for the column, one for the header, but if you utilize logic and nesting variables and or hidden questions, you can utilize those in place of the individual questions that you have in this particular grid. So you could have nested gender and age here and maybe income at the top, or leave the gender at the top and have this just be nested income in region. We'll go in a little bit more depth in the custom variables and nesting in a separate session. The other thing I wanted to show you as well within this same quota matrix that I've built is when I selected these items, I was selecting their overall, so just checking off these questions, meaning that all of their response options would appear in these grids. I can select the downward facing arrow to expand or collapse, and I can see all of the options. So if I wanted to remove one, because I don't care about it for whatever reason, I can just come here and deselect any of these options. So right now, when you check off the overall Q1, then the options below are both selected by default. If I go to Q2 as an example, it's probably a better one. I can come here and remove maybe orange and grapes. So if I now hit save, orange and grapes will not be on this list. Again, I can go back and add them as I see fit. And hit save. and we just have to update the limits again, either here or on the survey dashboard. And that's been an overview of the quota check pages. In this session, we're going to discuss survey themes and the built-in options available. I'm currently in the Build and Edit tool for this particular project. I'm clicking on Survey Settings on the top left, then I'm going to click on Theme. The theme card will open up in the main window, and from here, I can see what my active theme is. If I wanted to change this to a built-in theme that I have in my theme library, I can simply scroll down to the bottom and pick any of these built-in options that are available to anybody across the Cmix platform. So if I want to switch to Cmix Dark, maybe I like this particular theme, just click on Activate, and now if I scroll back up, you'll see that is the currently active theme. Now you can modify this as you see fit by clicking on Edit CSS. This will give you the raw CSS for the entire survey theme. You can modify this as you see fit for any part of the project whatsoever. At the bottom, I can actually name this to be something that makes sense to me. I'll just type in test 1 and just click on save as new theme. Let's make believe I made some actual changes to it. If I again scroll down to the bottom, I can click on the survey themes this time, and I can see that this theme has been saved to this specific project. So this is only available to this particular survey. If I then wanted to make this particular theme available to everybody else in my organization, I can click on Edit CSS. I can maybe label it something that makes sense. Maybe I can label it as ABC company theme. I can click on the Share to Company option and then click on Save as New Theme. What will happen now is in the shared themes, this ABC co-theme will appear. So now this is available to anybody tied to my organization, which has build and edit access. So as long as I have permissions to be able to use the authoring piece of the system, I can come here, go to my shared theme, and select and activate the particular theme that's already been created by somebody else in the organization, or maybe even myself, to activate for this particular survey. So this way I don't have to recreate the wheel. I've already created this theme for other projects. It's already in use. I can just come here, activate it, and now it's tied to this survey as well. There is also a link to an article on the top right to show how to add a survey logo to your survey. So if you want to brand it, you can just follow the directions tied to this particular article up here. That's the basic way to do it. Very, very easy process to follow, which is a link to our knowledge base. So you can utilize that. Or if you wanted to, the other option is to actually use CSS and build it directly into the survey theme so you don't have to think about it. So once you activate the theme, if the CSS is there and you're using an image or a logo and place it wherever you wanted to, using that theme, it will be then available there as well. So those are a couple ways to also add a logo to your theme. This has been a quick tutorial on how to modify and manage your theme. To review, you should now have a basic understanding of the Build and Edit tool, how to access it, how to navigate throughout it, and how to build your survey from scratch, adding questions, adding pages, adding skip logic, termination logic, quota check pages. That is the basics of the Build and Edit tool. Now with this knowledge, you should be able to program at least a basic survey. And with some more of the sessions that will be coming in the near future, you'll be able to add more and more knowledge to your toolbox.